We need new horsepower. The words dropped into the conference room like a wrecking ball. I sat at the far end of the polished table, my coffee cooling untouched, as the board chairman's voice reverberated off the glass walls. 18 years with the Gravora Group, and this is how it ends. My name is Walter Briggs. I'm 58. Until this morning, I was the senior vice president of operations for one of Houston's most dependable logistics firms. I designed their entire route network, salvaged 3 critical clients during the 2008 financial crash, and steered us through 2020 without a single layoff. I assumed that meant something. We're bringing in someone with a fresh perspective, the chairman continued, avoiding my eyes. Someone who understands the evolving business landscape. I already knew who it was. Chase Langford, 33, married to the CEO's daughter. Background in lifestyle branding, with 0 experience in transportation. I'd heard the murmurs for months, the dinner parties, the golf rounds where decisions were made long before they landed in a board packet. I folded my hands and said nothing. There was no point in protesting. No need to recount my resume or the contracts I'd personally secured. The decision had been made. Likely weeks ago. Walter, we appreciate everything you've done for Gravora Group, the CEO finally said, offering me a look rehearsed to sound sincere. Your loyalty hasn't gone unnoticed. Unnoticed. 18 years, distilled into a polite dismissal. The meeting dragged on for another 20 minutes. Transition plans, handover dates, a farewell gathering. I sat quietly, already thinking ahead. In my coat pocket was the edge of a business card I'd been carrying for months, a card that could change everything. Back at my office, I began boxing up personal items. The farewell event was scheduled for Friday. That gave Chase just enough time to shadow me and absorb a career's worth of knowledge in 4 days. As I placed my coffee mug into the cardboard box, my phone buzzed. A message from my daughter, Catherine. How'd the meeting go, Dad? I stared at the screen, then typed back. Big changes coming. I didn't tell her I'd just been pushed into early retirement. Didn't mention my replacement was a 30-something with connections, but no competence. That conversation could wait. The business card in my pocket felt heavier now. It belonged to someone who knew the weight of long-term relationships. Someone who might have a very different kind of opportunity. The next morning, I arrived at the office early. The rising sun lit the Houston skyline in streaks of orange and gold. I'd sat at this desk since 2007, back when Gravora was still a modest operation fighting for survival. I helped change that. I thought of my first major win, the Petrox Industries deal, a $120 million contract everyone said was too big for us. I spent 6 months building trust with their procurement team, learning their logistics inside and out. We cut their shipping costs by 15%. When the deal closed, the CEO called me in and shook my hand. Walter, you just saved this company. That was a long time ago, before he forgot what I'd done. Over the years, I built something real. Relationships with drivers who trusted me. Clients who knew we delivered. Vendors who respected that a handshake from Walter Briggs meant something. I missed family holidays to handle last-minute deliveries. I worked weekends to untangle routing conflicts. I even mortgaged my home in 2009 to help meet payroll. But the tide had shifted. The CEO's son-in-law started appearing in client meetings. Chase sat off to the side, poking at his phone, asking questions that betrayed a complete misunderstanding of our model. Clients smiled politely, but their eyes said it all. Why is this guy here? The warning signs piled up. I was left out of planning sessions. Budget approvals I once handled went straight to finance. When I flagged a route adjustment that could cost us our biggest client, I was told my perspective was respected, but maybe too tied to the past. 3 months ago, it all clicked. I was reviewing quarterly client feedback when my phone rang. Alyssa Cormack, my Petrox contact of 8 years. A friend as well as a colleague. Walter, can I ask you something off the record? She'd heard whispers of leadership changes at Gravora. I told her there was nothing official, but transitions were possible. She went quiet, then offered her personal business card. If anything changes, call me. We've built something important, and I don't want to lose that. I thanked her and slipped the card into my wallet. I didn't think much of it until now. That wasn't just a card. It was a lifeline. By Friday, the farewell gathering loomed like a slow-moving thunderstorm. 4 p.m., same conference room where I'd been dismissed 3 days prior. That morning, I trained Chase. I walked him through our key clients. He nodded along like he understood, but it was clear he didn't. So we just moved stuff from A to B. He asked during our Petrox walkthrough. How hard can it be? I didn't correct him. Just handed him the contract binder and suggested he read the delivery specs carefully. At 3:30, I gathered my last few items and headed to the conference room. There was a cake. Thank you, Walter, and blue icing. About 20 people came, mostly drivers and warehouse staff who'd worked beside me for years. The board had other obligations. The CEO gave a short speech, thanked me for my service, wished me luck. Then Chase stepped up. I just want to say, he began with that same smug grin, Walter's done good work, but business moves on. We need new energy, new ideas. Your time is over, old man. Don't worry, I'll take good care of what you built. The room went still. Drivers shifted. A supervisor looked down at the floor. I felt something inside me settle, cold and focused. No response. No defense. I shook hands with the people who mattered and walked out with my box. In the parking lot, I sat in my truck as the sun dipped low behind the building. 18 years. Early mornings. Late nights. I thought of the clients who had placed their trust in me. The staff who counted on me. Chase's smirk. I pulled out my phone. Alyssa's card. She answered after 2 rings. Walter, I've been expecting your call. The board made their move, I said. Chase Langford? That's him. A pause. Walter, we need to talk. Are you free for dinner tomorrow? I started the truck and drove off Gravora's lot for the final time as an employee. I'll be there. For the first time in months, I didn't feel angry or bitter. I felt clear. Saturday night, I met Alyssa at a quiet steakhouse on Houston's west side. She'd reserved a corner booth. When she opened her leather folder and slid some documents across the table, I understood why. Before we get into this, she said, I'm sorry. 18 years, and they replace you with a guy who asked me last week if our chemicals need refrigerated delivery. I almost laughed. Refrigerated? For industrial lubricants? He thought we were a food supplier. Alyssa shook her head. Walter, I've been in procurement 15 years. You are the most reliable partner I've had. You say a truck arrives at 2 p.m. Tuesday. It's there. Period. She pulled out a contract. This is our current deal with Gravora. $120 million over 3 years. Renewable. That's 40% of their total revenue. I knew those figures by heart. Chase doesn't understand this contract exists because of you. When the pipeline ruptured in 2018, you came at midnight to coordinate emergency shipments. During last year's freeze, you sourced a backup supplier in 6 hours. That's not standard, it's exceptional. She leaned forward. Petrox is exploring alternatives. Our agreement with Gravora expires in 60 days. If we don't renew, they lose their top client. I set down my cup. What are you proposing? Balex Maritime reached out 6 months ago. They're expanding into ground logistics. They offered us a deal, but I said we were happy because you were still with Gravora. She paused. Now, we're reconsidering. If you were to join Balex, we'd have a reason to take their offer seriously. Over the next hour, Alyssa laid out the details. Balex was flush with capital, growing fast, and in need of someone who could lead their logistics expansion. The role, executive consultant with equity. It's a strong offer, she said, sliding over the terms. But more than that, it's a clean start. No politics, no nepotism, just the opportunity to build again. The base pay was solid. The equity, potentially life-changing. One catch, Alyssa added. Balex needs a decision in 2 weeks. They want to announce leadership by month end. I looked up. 2 weeks isn't much. Long enough for Gravora to realize what they lost, she said. I'm telling them next Friday we're not renewing, and that we're looking for a partner with experienced leadership. We finished dinner talking strategy and market shifts. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel finished. I felt ready, but my mind was already moving through the fallout. Chase would be left to manage the Petrox Industries account for just 9 days. 9 days before they informed Gravora Group that they were pulling out. He wouldn't know how to respond, wouldn't have any relationships to lean on, wouldn't even understand what had gone wrong. Driving home, I felt something I hadn't experienced since the day I was fired. Anticipation. Not for revenge, exactly. For the chance to prove that knowledge, consistency, and professional relationships still mattered. I had 48 hours to make my decision, but in truth, I'd made it the moment Chase called me an old man who'd outlived his usefulness. On Monday morning, I called Balex Maritime and set a meeting with their leadership. The company's headquarters were housed in a sleek, glass-paneled building near the shipping channel. Walking through the lobby, I could already see why Alyssa had praised their proposal. Their CEO, Victoria Henley, was a former ExxonMobil exec with a deep grasp of energy logistics. She had founded Balex Maritime 5 years ago with private equity support, growing it quickly by focusing on niche petroleum and chemical transport. Walter, your reputation precedes you, Victoria said, greeting me warmly in her office. All I've heard is praise for your work at Gravora. The Petrox account alone brings in more revenue than many full operations. I appreciated her candor. Alyssa mentioned you might be exploring inland logistics, I said. More than exploring. We've been planning that move for over a year. But we needed the right person, someone with real results and deep connections. She leaned back in her chair. What Alyssa may not have told you is that we've been watching Gravora closely. Their client retention has dropped significantly. That was new to me. I hadn't heard about any major departures. 3 contracts canceled in the last 6 months, she continued, citing poor communication and inconsistent service. It explains some of the decisions they made. She handed me a folder. We looked deeper after Alyssa reached out. Gravora's finances are shakier than they seem. They're covering expenses with short-term loans, and their debt-to-equity ratio has ballooned. The reports backed her up. Gravora was tightening its belt, cutting experienced leadership in favor of family ties, an internal strategy that made sense only if you ignored the external risks. How did you get this? I asked. Public filings. Industry chatter. Logistics is a small world. When a company starts bleeding, everyone hears about it. Balex, she explained, had been evaluating distressed firms for acquisition. But poaching talent and clients was faster and cleaner. If I joined and brought Petrox with me, it would vault their inland expansion ahead by years. There's more, she added. We've had informal talks with 2 other Gravora clients. They're open to switching if they know they'll be working with people they trust. She named the accounts. I knew them both. I'd personally cultivated those relationships through late nights, hands-on solutions, and years of reliability. If they followed Petrox to Balex, Gravora would lose more than half its income in a few short months. What would my role look like? I asked. You'd head inland logistics, full authority, equity stake, build your team from scratch. The only ask is that you maintain the standards that made you a legend at Gravora. Driving home, I realized this wasn't just a job opportunity. It was a correction. Gravora had gambled that the loyalty of our clients was to the brand, not to the people behind the results. They were about to find out just how wrong they were. Tuesday morning, I signed the paperwork. Victoria handled it herself. We agreed on a start date the following Monday, giving us exactly 1 week to transition clients and prepare for the fallout. My first call was to Alyssa. It's done, I told her. Perfect. I'm meeting with Chase on Friday to discuss our contract. Should be entertaining. What will you tell him? The truth. Petrox is exploring new partnerships. We're not renewing. I could already see Chase's reaction. Calls to the CEO, frantic meetings, desperate attempts to patch a sinking ship. But by then, the damage would be irreversible. Alyssa, I said, I appreciate you backing me. This isn't a gamble, Walter. It's smart business. You've delivered for 18 years. Petrox needs someone we can count on. Wednesday and Thursday, I worked from home, developing transition strategies, reviewing client portfolios. Balex had excellent systems, better than anything we had at Gravora. They were leaner, more agile, and more advanced. Thursday evening, my phone rang. Gravora's main line. Walter, this is James from the CEO's office. Mr. Davidson would like to meet tomorrow morning, 9 a.m.? I nearly laughed. What's the topic? He mentioned client relationships, transition planning. Tell Mr. Davidson I'm not available. I haven't been employed by Gravora since last Friday. I think there's a misunderstanding. This would be a paid consult. There's no misunderstanding, James. Have a good night. Friday morning, I was reviewing contracts at Balex when Victoria came in with her phone. You'll want to see this. A news alert from the Houston Business Journal. Gravora Group loses major client, stock down 15%. Petrox had filed a disclosure about their contract termination. The market responded fast and hard. Their shares tumbled under heavy trading. How did this go public so quickly? I asked. Petrox is listed. They had to disclose it, Victoria replied. And investors are very curious who they're partnering with now. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Walter, this is Chase Langford. We need to talk. Call me. I showed Victoria. What do you think? I think Chase Langford is having a terrible day, she smiled. And it's only getting worse. By that evening, 2 more former clients had called me, asking about consulting availability. Word had spread. I was back in the game. I didn't return Chase's call. I didn't call Gravora. I didn't post anything or brag. I just picked up the phone when it rang and scheduled meetings. The market would handle the rest. 3 weeks later, I sat in my new office at Balex when Victoria walked in with a folded newspaper. You'll want to read this. The headline, Gravora Group seeks emergency funding after client exodus. The article confirmed it. Petrox was just the first. Morrison Chemical and Gulf States Energy followed. All 3 had signed with Balex, citing our experience and reliability. Within 2 weeks, Gravora lost nearly 70% of its top accounts. The board called an emergency meeting. Chase resigned for personal reasons. The CEO secured a bridge loan to stay afloat. There's more, Victoria said, pointing to a smaller article. Chase Langford joins father-in-law's real estate firm. Logistics hadn't worked out. What about their operations? I asked. They're downsizing. The new manager is Jacob Miller. He reached out, asked if we'd consider a partnership. I remembered Jacob, solid, smart, but he'd inherited a disaster. What did you say? That we're open to subcontracting if they meet our quality standards. It was the right move. Balex was expanding fast. If Gravura could stabilize, there might be room to collaborate. But that would be a business call, not a personal favor. 6 months later, I drove past Gravura's old HQ. A for lease sign hung in the window. They'd relocated, smaller office, smaller scope, local deliveries, and subcontract work. Jacob was doing what he could, but the company was a shadow of its former self. I pulled into a coffee shop and took a seat by the window. My phone buzzed. Text from Catherine. Dad saw the Forbes article. Congrats on the expansion. The article praised Balek's rapid rise into inland logistics. We'd tripled our client base, expanded into 3 new states. My equity stake was now worth more than I'd earned in 2 decades. But that wasn't the real win. The real win was walking through our warehouse each morning, seeing drivers who trusted me, clients who respected me, and a business built on relationships, not shortcuts. I finished my coffee and headed to the office. Victoria was already there, reviewing new expansion proposals. Morning, Walter, she greeted me as I walked into the conference room. Let's change another industry, I said, opening my laptop. Outside, Houston was waking up again. The phone rang. I answered, just like always.